Desmond Ashcombe called me Vivian for 11 minutes before I let him keep believing it, and in the 12th minute, he told me exactly how he was going to destroy my sister. I sat in her chair, wearing her blazer, answering to her name, and I did not correct him. Not once. He'd poured 2 glasses of a wine I couldn't pronounce and left mine untouched on the desk between us. A manila folder sat beside it, and inside the folder was a signature. My sister's signature, on an authentication document she had never seen, notarized on a date she'd actually been in Aspen. $400,000, the private acquisition value, already signed, sealed, and dated 3 weeks earlier. He said the number twice, like repeating it made it smaller. My phone sat face up on the table, screen dark, recording the way it always did in client meetings. Gallery policy. Nobody's secret. "You've gotten quiet, Vivian," he said, and smiled the smile of a man who had never once been told no in his life. I smiled back the way she would have, and I let him keep talking. "My name is Eleanor Calloway, though nobody at Calloway Fine Art had called me that in years. I was Nell to the mailroom, the technician to my mother's friends at luncheons, and to my sister most days, I was mostly the solution to a scheduling problem." Vivian had a dress fitting that afternoon, for a wedding to Grant Whitfield 11 weeks out. I had a face close enough to hers, in the right light at the right distance, that a man who'd met her exactly twice wouldn't look twice at me in her blazer and her sunglasses. In a private office he'd specifically asked her not to bring anyone else to. "You'll be fine," she'd told me that morning, pressing her lipstick into my palm like a badge. "Just sit there and nod. It's not like you had plans." I didn't. That was the quietly humiliating truth of being 29 years old in my family. I had a closet-sized office at the back of the gallery, 3 framed degrees nobody at a dinner party ever asked about, and a talent nobody in my family had thought was worth putting a name to. I could tell a forged painting by the rhythm of the brush before I could tell you what color the sky was in it. My father taught me that, back when he still had a gallery to teach me in. "Real paint moves like breathing," he used to say, tapping a canvas with one finger. "Fake paint moves like it's trying to convince you of something. Always check the back before you trust the front," he told me more than once, because forgers spend all their effort on what people are looking at, and none on what they aren't. 8 years ago, a client accused my father of selling him a forged Adelina Voss landscape for $200,000. By the time the scandal finished with him, the man who taught me to hear the truth in a brushstroke was dead of a heart attack on the floor of his own gallery, and nobody in my family wanted to say the word forgery out loud again. My mother sold half the collection and kept the name over the door. Calloway Fine Art still occupied 3 floors of a pre-war building 11 blocks from the park, in the stretch of Manhattan where old money never quite goes out of style, even when the family wearing it is quietly running out. Vivian took the front office. I took the room in the back where nobody had to look at me remembering him. I never believed he did it. I just never had anything except a feeling, and a drawer full of receipts that didn't add up. Ashcombe didn't know any of that. To him I was Vivian Calloway, gallery director, a woman he'd been circling for months with invitations to lunches she always sent me to instead, because I was better with the paperwork and she was better with the room. "I need the gallery to authenticate something for me," he said, and slid a photograph across the desk. A landscape, wheat-colored fields, a low stone wall, a sky doing something complicated in the corner, and a signature that made my stomach drop before I'd even finished reading it: Adelina Voss. I knew every real Voss in private hands. There were 11 of them. This wasn't one of them. "It's beautiful," I said, because that's what Vivian would have said, and because I needed him talking more than I needed to be honest. "It's going to sell for $4.2 million at your gallery's Founders Gala. With your signature on the authentication, and when the world eventually notices what you and I already know about it, that signature is the only one anyone will remember." There it was. Not an offer, a plan already in motion, with my sister's name already glued to the bottom of it. "And if I say no?" He almost laughed. "Then I show your board the file I built 8 years ago, the one that proves your father wasn't the only Calloway who knew how to move a forged Voss through this gallery. I was very patient with him, Vivian. I don't have to be patient with you." My hands did not shake. I want that on the record, even if nobody but me will ever know what it cost to keep them still, because he had just told me, without meaning to, that the file that killed my father hadn't been evidence. It had been his homework. I thanked him for a wine I hadn't touched and left with my phone still recording in my bag. 11 minutes and 40 seconds of a confession he thought he was giving to the wrong sister on purpose, and had actually given to the right one, entirely by accident. I made it to the parking garage before my legs remembered they were supposed to hold me up. I didn't hear him walk over. Miles Tanner had a way of being in a room for 10 minutes before anyone noticed him, which I'd assumed for the 3 weeks he'd worked in our shipping department was just because he was new and quiet, and only there to catalog crates nobody else wanted to catalog. "You're not Vivian," he said, not a question. I didn't have the energy to lie to a man holding a clipboard. "How long have you known?" "Since you checked your reflection in the elevator glass like you expected someone else to be standing there." He set the clipboard down on the hood of a car that wasn't his. "She doesn't do that. She likes what she sees." I didn't know this man. I knew he had a scar through one eyebrow he'd never explained, that he signed for deliveries in handwriting too careful for someone who moved boxes for a living, and that he had a habit of standing a little too close to any Voss painting that came through our loading dock, like he was listening for something the rest of us couldn't hear. "If he ever asks you into that office again," Miles said, "don't go alone. Come get me first." "You catalog crates?" "I catalog a lot of things." He picked the clipboard back up like the conversation was over, then didn't leave. "You're shaking, by the way. Sit down before you try to drive anywhere." I sat down on the concrete parking bumper in a blazer that wasn't mine, in front of a man I'd spoken to maybe 4 times, and for the first time in longer than I wanted to admit, someone had given me an order that felt like being looked after instead of looked past. "Why do you care?" I asked. He considered the question longer than it deserved. "Let's just say I have my own reasons to be interested in anyone selling a Voss nobody's seen before." I filed that away. I was good at filing things away. It was, as it turned out, the only skill in my body my family had ever fully underestimated. I didn't tell Vivian what he'd said, not that night. I told her the meeting had gone fine, that Ashcombe wanted to consign a piece for the gala, and I watched her nod without really hearing me, already texting Grant about seating charts. "See," she said, "not so hard." I went home and sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the refrigerator and listened to 11 minutes and 40 seconds of a man describing, in his own unhurried voice, exactly how he planned to end her. I didn't cry. I want that on the record too. I opened the drawer where I kept 8 years of things nobody had asked to see, appraisal logs with dates that didn't line up, a receipt for a canvas order my father swore he never placed, a photograph of a painting that had supposedly burned in a warehouse fire that had never, according to the fire department's own report I'd requested 3 separate times, actually happened. I had been collecting proof of my father's innocence for 8 years the way other people collect stamps, quietly, privately, with absolutely nowhere to put it. Tonight, for the first time, I had somewhere to put it. The gallery's lawyer had handled our family for 11 years, ever since my father hired him fresh off a name partner track he'd walked away from for reasons nobody ever explained very well. Preston Doyle had a corner office 2 floors above mine, a voice built for calming down rich people, and a habit of being unreachable exactly when you needed him most. I caught him on his way out Thursday evening. "I want to ask about reopening my father's case." Something crossed his face and was gone so fast I told myself I'd imagined it. "Nell, we've talked about this." "Not since the funeral." "Your father's case is closed. Reopening it would drag your mother and your sister through a fire that finally went out." He said it kindly. He always said things kindly, which was, I would later understand, exactly what had made him so useful to a man like Ashcombe for 8 quiet years. Let him rest, let all of it rest. I almost told him about the recording. I had the sentence half formed, standing right there in the elevator lobby, and some old animal caution I didn't have a name for yet, closed my mouth before it opened. I told him I'd think about it instead. He smiled the way he always smiled, told me to get some rest, and pressed the button for a floor that wasn't his. I noticed that. I filed it away too. I found Miles in the loading dock that night, still there past 9, running his thumb along the backing of a crate like he could read it in Braille. "I have something," I said. "You should probably see it before I lose my nerve." He didn't ask what. He just closed the crate, wiped his hands, and followed me up to my closet-sized office, where I locked the door out of a habit I'd never examined until I watched myself do it in front of him. I played him 11 minutes and 40 seconds of Desmond Ashcombe explaining how he was going to burn my sister's career to the ground using a painting that didn't exist 8 years ago, and somehow now had a paper trail thick enough to survive an auction house's due diligence. Miles didn't say anything until the recording ended. Then he said very quietly, "Play it again." I did. On the second pass, I watched something in his face go still and cold in a way the shipping department's newest hire had no business having a face for. "There've been 4 of these," he said finally. 4 unlisted Voss paintings surfacing in 3 years, always through a dealer with some connection back to Ashcombe. "I've been tracking the pattern for a while now." "Tracking it for who?" He looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look that costs a person something to give. "Not yet. Ask me again when I trust you not to run." It should have made me angrier than it did. Instead, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the file. 8 years of receipts and appraisal logs, and a fire department report that said the warehouse fire that supposedly destroyed a painting had never happened, spread out across my desk like a confession of my own. He went quiet again, longer this time, turning pages with careful hands of someone who understood exactly what he was holding. "You've had this the whole time," he said. "Why didn't you ever take it anywhere?" "Because a drawer full of feelings isn't evidence. Because everyone I love told me to let it rest. Because I was 21 when he died and nobody hands a 21-year-old the microphone." I closed the file. "I have a recording now." "Then don't let it sit in a drawer too." He said it gently, but it landed like a hand on my shoulder. "Back it up, somewhere he can't reach." That night I emailed a copy to my own account under a name that wasn't mine. Then, after staring at the send button longer than I want to admit, I sent a second copy to an address Miles had written on the back of a shipping manifest. I told myself it was just good practice. It didn't feel like just good practice. The gala was 9 days away, and Callaway Fine Art moved like a house catching fire in slow motion. Preston started appearing at Vivian's office twice a day with authentication paperwork that needed her signature. Before the Voss can go to press for the catalog, Vivian, buried under seating charts and cake tastings, signed things without reading them the way she'd signed things without reading them her entire adult life, because someone else had always read them for her first. I started reading them instead, every one twice, looking for the exact language Ashcombe would need to make her signature do what he wanted it to do. I tried my mother once, just once. I've been going back through Dad's file. I told her over a lunch she'd scheduled to talk about gala seating, not about him. I don't think he did what they said he did. My mother set her fork down with the specific, controlled patience of a woman who has had this conversation before and hated every version of it. "Your father's name isn't something to keep polishing like a hobby, Eleanor. Some of us have moved on." "I'm not polishing anything. I found real inconsistencies, a fire that never happened, a signature that doesn't match his hand from the same month." "And what exactly do you think happens if you're right?" Her voice didn't rise. It never rose, which was somehow worse. "Your sister's wedding is in 11 weeks. The gala carries this gallery's entire year. Do you want to blow all of it up chasing a ghost, or do you want to let your father rest and let the rest of us keep eating?" I want to tell you I had a devastating comeback. I didn't. I sat there in the restaurant my mother liked because it was quiet and expensive, and I understood, maybe for the first time all the way down to the bone, that she had decided 8 years ago which daughter's grief was allowed to be loud, and it had never once been mine. I paid for lunch, she let me. Miles found me an hour later sitting on the loading dock steps with my shoes off, which was not a normal place for the family's authentication expert to be found, and not a normal thing for her to be doing. "Bad lunch?" "Spectacular lunch. 5 stars, would recommend to nobody." I didn't look up. You ever have a family that decided who gets to be upset about things before you were even born? Something like that. He sat down next to me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched and didn't, careful in a way that felt deliberate. "My family decided a long time ago that some of us get remembered, and some of us get to do the remembering. It's a specific kind of tired." "That's the most honest thing you've said to me since I met you." "Don't get used to it." But he was almost smiling when he said it, and for a second the gala and Ashcombe and my mother's specific brand of quiet cruelty all receded to a normal, survivable distance. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're chasing a ghost. You don't know anything about it. I know a man doesn't build an 8-year-old file on someone unless he's protecting himself from something real." He looked at me sideways. "Your father found something. That's not a theory anymore. That's just what the recording says." I let my head fall sideways onto his shoulder, an inch of contact that felt like the loudest thing I'd done all week. He didn't move away. He didn't make it into anything either, which somehow made it mean more. "If you were ever in real danger from that man," he said low, "I would not be standing on a loading dock asking politely. I need you to know that about me before this gets worse. And it is going to get worse." I believed him. I didn't know yet how much I was going to need to. Vivian found me 20 minutes after Miles left, mascara smudged in a way she'd have hated anyone seeing. "Grant's mother hates the seating chart," she said, sitting down hard beside me, shoes already off before she'd finished sitting. "She hates the venue. I think she might hate me a little. And I have 400 emails and a painting I'm supposed to sign off on that I haven't actually looked at, because I don't have a single free hour between now and the gala to look at anything." It would have been easy to stay angry at her. It would have been easier still to tell her everything, right there, and watch her face change. I didn't do either. "You don't have to have it all together every second," I said instead, which was as close as I could get, that day, to the truth. She leaned her head on my shoulder, the same inch of space Miles had occupied 20 minutes earlier, and for one strange, suspended minute, I had both the people I loved most in the world sitting exactly where I'd been sitting, needing something from me I didn't know yet how to give either of them honestly. "You're a good sister, Nell," Vivian said quietly. "I don't say that enough." I said nothing. I let her have the silence instead, because I didn't yet know if it was still going to be true by the time the gala was over. Ashcombe found me 3 days later, alone, in the gallery's East Room, standing in front of a vase that was actually real. "You've been asking Preston about your father," he said without hello. I didn't turn around right away. When I did, I made sure my face gave him nothing. "Family history. Nothing that concerns you?" "Everything about this family concerns me, Eleanor," he said my real name slowly, savoring it, and I understood in that instant that he had known for days, maybe from the moment I walked out of his office. The technician. How fitting. Nobody ever thinks to watch the ones who are only there to do the parts nobody looks at. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the same wine he'd poured for a woman he'd thought was my sister. "Your father made the mistake of thinking that finding the truth was the same thing as being safe. I'd hate for his daughter to make the same miss twice in one family." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. Facts don't need volume." He smiled, the same smile from the office, and this close it looked exactly like what it was. "Your sister signs the final authentication on Tuesday. The painting sells Saturday night in front of 300 people who matter. And if anyone at all, tries to make that difficult for me, I promise you I know exactly which Calloway daughter to make an example of. I've had practice." He walked away before I could answer, which was, I realized later, its own kind of answer. He didn't need to hear what I'd say. He'd already decided it wouldn't matter. I stood alone in the East Room for a long time after he left, in front of a painting my father had authenticated himself 12 years earlier, the last real vase he ever touched before his name became a word my family stopped saying out loud. I was done being quiet on other people's schedules. "He knows it was me," I told Miles that night, back on the loading dock steps that had somehow become our office. "He threatened me directly. He as good as told me he'd do to me what he did to my father." Miles's jaw did something controlled and dangerous. "Then we move up the timeline." "Move it up to what?" "I have a recording a lawyer will call doctored in about 4 seconds, a file full of things that only prove somebody's guilty of something, and a sister who signs the final authentication on Tuesday for a painting that's about to sell for $4.2 million in front of everyone who's ever mattered to this family. You have more than that." He turned to face me fully, and something in his posture had changed, some old caution finally setting down a weight it had been carrying since the day we met. "I need to tell you who I actually am, and I need you to not hate me for how long I waited." I braced myself for CEO. For hidden fortune, hidden company, hidden name on a building somewhere. I'd read enough headlines to know the shape of that reveal even before it landed. It wasn't that. "Adelina Voss was my great-aunt," he said, "my mother's aunt. She died with 11 paintings to her name and about $400 in a bank account, because the men who bought her work while she was alive paid her a fraction of what it was worth, and then multiplied that worth by 10 the second she stopped being alive to argue about it. My mother spent 30 years trying to protect what was left of her name. I took it over when she got sick, I run the small, underfunded foundation that's the only reason anyone can authenticate a VOS at all anymore. I took this job the week after our own review flagged a consignment moving through a dealer who does regular, quiet business with your family's gallery. Ashcombe doesn't sell direct if he can help it. He launders provenance through people like your mother's clients list. I needed to be inside the one building that kept processing his paperwork. This was it. I sat with that for a long moment. Somewhere underneath the shock, a single detail rearranged itself in my memory, small and sharp. I catalog a lot of things he'd told me weeks ago, in a parking garage, and I had thought it was almost a joke. It hadn't. "You've been standing next to me for 3 weeks doing your job," I said slowly, "and your actual job is protecting the one thing in the world I understand better than anyone in my own family." I know how that sounds. "It sounds," I said, "like maybe you're the first person in a long time who wasn't lying to me about something that mattered." He almost smiled at that, tired and real. For 2 years, federal investigators have had an active file on Ashcombe. What they don't have is a confession in his own voice connecting him to a pattern that goes back 8 years instead of 3. What they don't have is you. The break-in happened 2 nights later. I found my office door already unlocked when I meant to open it, papers moved in the specific, careless way that always means someone wanted you to know they'd been there, and my hard drive gone from the bottom drawer along with 8 years of a file I had never once let out of my sight until the night I decided, foolishly, that my own gallery was the safest place to keep it. I called Miles before I called anyone else. My hands were not steady this time. I want that on the record too. "It's gone," I said. "All of it. The drive, the fire report, the receipts, everything except what's on the recording, and I don't even know anymore if that survives without the rest of it behind it." "Say that again, slower." "Someone took it, Miles. Preston has the only other key to this office besides me and my mother, and Preston has been unreachable since 4 o'clock. The silence on the line lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "I need you to hear something," he said finally. "The federal team has had eyes on 2 of Ashcombe's known associates for months. One of them met with a man matching Preston Doyle's description outside a parking structure 4 blocks from your gallery at 8:15 tonight. I only found out an hour ago. I was about to call you." The floor of my closet-sized office did not feel like a safe place to be standing anymore. Preston called me himself the next morning, before I'd even had coffee, his voice wrapped in the same calm he used on rich people who'd just lost something expensive. "I heard about the break-in," he said. "Terrible. I've already spoken to building security." "Preston." I let the silence sit there as long as I could stand it. "Where were you at 8:15 last night?" The pause that followed was the loudest thing he'd ever said to me. "Careful, Nell," he said finally, all the warmth gone out of his voice like a light switched off. "You don't have the paperwork anymore to make accusations like that. And if you keep making them anyway, the story that goes to your mother's board isn't about Ashcombe. It's about a junior staffer with a grudge, doctoring gallery documents to smear a decorated client days before the biggest sale in this company's history." He hung up before I could answer, which I was starting to notice was becoming a pattern among the men in my life who preferred conversations they controlled from both ends. I sat very still for a long time after that, staring at an empty drawer, genuinely unsure, for the first time since this whole thing started, whether I was about to save my sister or become the story that finally finished off what was left of my family's name. "The recording still exists," Miles told me that afternoon, finding me before I could spiral any further. "You sent it to me the same night you played it for me. I never deleted it. I wasn't going to tell you that until I was sure I could trust what you'd do with it, and then there wasn't a good moment, and then there was a break-in, and I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry." Relief hit me so hard I had to sit down on the nearest crate. "You've had it this whole time? And the federal team has had a copy for 6 days since the night you first played it for me. I should have told you that part too." He crouched down in front of me, closing some of the distance that had defined every conversation we'd had until now. "I wasn't trying to use you. I was trying to make sure that when this broke, it broke in a way that protected you instead of burying you next to everyone else Ashcombe's ever touched." And Preston's threat, the story about a junior staffer with a grudge, doesn't survive contact with a federal art crimes investigation that's been open for 2 years. Something steadier moved into his voice. "The gala is Saturday. Ashcombe thinks he's about to sell a $4.2 million forgery under your sister's authentication. What he doesn't know is that the foundation I run gets a formal right of review on any newly surfaced VOS before final sale. It's in writing. It's boring, unglamorous paperwork nobody reads until the day it matters. And today's the day it matters. Today's the day it matters. For the first time in 9 days, I let myself believe we might actually win this before it cost me the last thing I had left to lose. The Founders Gala filled the gallery's main room with 300 people in black tie, a string quartet, and a painting under white silk in the center of the room that had already, according to printed program in every guest's hand, been authenticated as an original Adelina Voss by Vivian Calloway, gallery director. Vivian looked luminous and terrified in a way I recognized, because I'd worn the same expression myself 9 days earlier in a chair that wasn't mine. My mother stood near the podium in the same green dress she'd worn to my father's funeral, which I doubted she remembered and I would never forget. Ashcombe found me by the bar, champagne in hand, more relaxed than I had ever seen him. "Eleanor," he said it warmly this time, like a man already counting money that hadn't cleared yet. "No hard feelings, I hope. Business is business." "Sure," I said. "Business is business." He didn't hear the specific shape of my calm the way I'd learned to hear his. That was, I would think later, the whole story of how men like Desmond Ashcombe finally lose. Not to noise, to someone quiet enough that they stop listening. At 8:15, my mother took the podium to welcome everyone to the gallery my father built, and to introduce, with genuine pride in her voice, the newest addition to the Calloway collection. The silk came off the painting. And Miles Tanner, who 3 weeks ago had been the shipping department's newest and quietest hire, walked to the front of the room in a suit nobody there had ever seen him wear, and asked, in a voice that carried to every corner without needing to be raised, for the sale to stop. "My name is Miles Tanner," he said, into a silence so complete I could hear the ice settling in someone's glass 3 tables away. "I'm the director of the Voss Legacy Foundation. Adelina Voss was my great-aunt. Under an agreement this gallery signed with the foundation 4 years ago, no newly surfaced Voss painting may be sold without our formal review." A murmur went through the room like wind through wheat. My mother's face at the podium went the color of the silk still bunched in her hands. "That review happened this morning," Miles continued. "The canvas backing on this painting carries a manufacturer's stamp that didn't exist until 6 years after Adelina Voss died. It is not, and cannot be, an authentic work." Ashcombe's champagne glass didn't shake, I'll give him that. But something in his face went very still, the specific stillness of a man doing fast arithmetic on how much of the room he could still control. "This is a business dispute," he said, loud enough for the tables closest to hear, light enough to still sound reasonable. "Authentication disagreements happen. There's no need to turn a gala into a courtroom." "You're right," Miles said, "there's no need, because you already explained it yourself." I stepped forward before I could talk myself out of it, my phone already in my hand, the way it had been in an office 9 days earlier, recording gallery policy, nobody's secret. I set it on the podium's microphone stand and pressed play. Desmond Ashcombe's voice filled a room of 300 people who mattered, describing, in his own unhurried words, exactly how he intended to sell a forged painting under a signature that wasn't really Vivian's decision at all, and exactly what he'd threatened to do to her if she refused. Then the recording reached the part I'd been waiting 9 days to let this room hear. "Then I show your board the file I built 8 years ago. The one that proves your father wasn't the only Calloway who knew how to move a forged Voss through this gallery. I was very patient with him, Vivian. I don't have to be patient with you." The room did not stay quiet after that. "Turn that off." Ashcombe's voice had lost every ounce of warmth it had ever borrowed. "Turn it off right now." "It's already off," I said. "It finished 30 seconds ago. You just weren't listening." He looked at me then, really looked, and I watched 8 years of quiet, careful contempt finally show itself on a face that had spent decades learning how to hide it in front of a room. "The technician," he said, low enough that only the closest tables caught it. "Nobody ever thinks to watch the invisible ones." "You said that to me once already," I said. I remembered it. "Turns out that's what invisible people are good at." 2 men I hadn't noticed near the gallery's side entrance were already moving, credentials out, and I understood watching Ashcombe's face when he saw them, that Miles's federal team had been waiting for exactly this moment for longer than 9 days. Preston Doyle didn't wait to be approached. He was gone before anyone thought to look for him, though not gone enough. The Bar Association notice came 6 weeks later, and the federal indictment that followed named him as an accessory. 11 years of quiet, well-paid loyalty to my family finally revealed as 11 years of reporting our every move to the man who destroyed my father. Ashcombe was indicted on federal wire fraud and conspiracy charges 19 days after the gala. His collection, the real parts and the forged parts both, was seized pending investigation. I heard later that the 11 authentic Voss paintings I'd always known about were the only pieces of it anyone still trusted. My mother found me in the coat room 40 minutes after the room finally emptied, still in the green dress, mascara doing the same thing Vivian's had done on the loading dock steps 2 weeks earlier. "You knew," she said. "Not an accusation, something closer to grief. You've known for weeks and you let me stand up at that podium. I tried to tell you once, you told me to let him rest." She flinched like I'd hit her, which I hadn't meant to do, and also, if I'm honest, hadn't entirely minded doing. I was wrong about all of it. I was wrong about your father, and I was wrong about which daughter I should have been listening to this whole time. I didn't say it's fine because it wasn't, not yet, and I was done saying things weren't true just to make a room more comfortable. Vivian found us both a few minutes later, heels in one hand, the other pressed flat against chest like she was holding something in. "He threatened to do to you what he did to Dad," she said. "You knew that, and you still went and got the proof instead of running." "I went and got the proof because I couldn't stand the idea of you signing your name to the thing that finally broke you. There's something you should know too," Vivian's voice caught. "He cornered me once at a preview 2 months ago. Said something that scared me badly enough that I told myself the dress fitting was real so I wouldn't have to look too closely at why I actually wanted someone else to go instead of me that day. I told myself it was nothing. I let it be your problem instead of mine, and I didn't even have the decency to know I was doing it. I hadn't expected that. I stood there a second longer than I meant to, watching 8 years of assumptions about my sister rearrange themselves into something sadder and more human than I'd let her be. She crossed the coat room in 3 steps and held onto me the way she hadn't since we were girls, before the gallery, before the front office and the back room, before somebody decided which one of us got to be the face, and which one got to be the parts nobody looks at. "I'm sorry," she said, into my shoulder. "For all of it. For every single time I called you the technician like it was smaller than what you actually are." "You're a good sister, Vivian," I said, giving her back the exact words she'd given me on the loading dock steps, and meaning them more than I expected to. I don't say that enough either. 3 weeks later, on a Sunday, my mother actually cleared her calendar for. I sat at the head of the family table for the first time in my adult life without anyone asking why I was sitting there. "What do you want, Nell?" my mother asked, passing a dish that had always gone to Vivian first every year, without either of us ever once questioning it. Really, not what's easiest for everyone else. "What do you actually want?" Nobody had asked me that in 8 years. I found to my own surprise that I already knew the answer. "I want my name on the door," I said. "Not instead of hers, next to it." My mother didn't argue, she just nodded, the way she used to nod at my father when he'd say something she'd already decided was right before he finished the sentence. Miles found me on the porch after dinner, 2 coffees in hand, and didn't say anything for a while, which had become, somewhere in the last month, one of my favorite things about him. "Federal team wrapped their statement today," he said finally. "Your father's name is officially cleared. It'll be in the filing by Friday." I let that land the way it needed to land, quietly, on a porch, instead of in a courtroom I'd spent 8 years imagining. "I used to think being invisible was the worst thing that ever happened to me," I said. "Turns out invisible people remember everything. Every receipt. Every date that didn't line up. Every single thing everyone else was too busy to notice." Miles set his coffee down and brushed his thumb once, gently, along my cheek, the kind of gesture that doesn't ask for anything back. "You were never invisible," he said. "You were just the only one in the room paying attention." I didn't need anyone to hand me a place at that table anymore. I'd already built one overlooked, unglamorous, exactly right thing at a time. I was already exactly where I belonged. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next story.